Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of the Rooted and Grounded podcast from the 109 Church of Christ in Lebanon, Tennessee. We've got Wayne Miller to my left.
Hey, Miller, how you doing today?
Good.
Good.
Matt Miller to my right.
What up?
And I am Matt Brown, and thank you for joining us and spending a little time with us today. So, guys, we're 7 episodes in now, and I feel like we've finally gotten a good form and the hang of the episodes down. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed that I think has been maybe a little unintentional has been that even though we have a verse of focus, we always find a theme. Mm-hmm. And so today I want to introduce the theme before we introduce the verse, and that is the will of God. Mm-hmm. And so obviously, this is a huge topic. It's a perplexing topic. It's a good topic. But I think if we had to describe it in a sentence, I would say, expect the unexpected. And I think that throughout the Bible and really throughout history, God uses unlikely people and unlikely circumstances in unlikely ways to accomplish his purpose. And the story that we're going to look at today, I think, really epitomizes expect the unexpected. And so let's look at the story of Esther and look at what she has done and what she does in God's plan, but also then from there find the roots and grounds of how we connect to the will of God. So with that being said, let's look at our key verse, and that is going to be Esther chapter 4, verse 14. And it says, "For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." So that phrase, "for such a time as this," is obviously a popular saying that many have pulled from the story of Esther as either a way to encourage people that are maybe struggling with a sense of belonging or maybe pushing them towards action. Mm-hmm. And while it is a powerful phrase from a powerful story, we want to make sure that we keep in mind how powerful the will of God is and understand the context. So Wayne, as we read this verse, it seems like obviously the Jews are in a really tense situation. There's a lot on the line. So tell us a little bit more about what's going on from a larger standpoint, but then tell us a little bit about who Queen Esther is.
Okay. Yeah, because you mentioned the key word there. It's tense.
Yeah.
It's tense. I mean, it's on for the people of God, the Jews, at this time. Because remember, the story of Esther kind of takes place with the Jews who were in Persia, did not return back to the homeland of Jerusalem after the captivity. And, I don't know, guys, but anybody who likes adventure, they like stories with a plot and a subplot, or they like, to read about a conniving villain. And
This is it.
This is it, man. I mean, you got these superstar heroes and stars that are shining, and one of those would be Esther at a moment like this, because that's what it's about. And the best way I know, Matt, to gain the insight to what the real situation was, what they were feeling, what they were dealing with, is just look at the Word of God. Look back in chapter 3. What created a moment such as this? Okay, in chapter 3, verse 8, Haman said to King, "There's a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those all other people, and they do," watch this, "and they do not observe the king's law. So it is not in the king's interest to let them remain." In other words, these folks may be a little opposition to us. You know what we need to do? We need to take care of them. So here's what he said in verse 9. "If it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed. Let there be a law made that they be destroyed." And then verse 11. "And the king said, the silver is yours, and the people also. Do to them as you please." When you look at that situation, guys, that this could be a moment of being annihilated. Mm-hmm. The Jews and the people of God being done away with. So when you look at that tense moment, you gain that insight into the scene. Yeah, it's a very trying time for the people of God. So no wonder chapter 4 says, such as a time as this, because it's a crucial moment in the history of God's people.
You know, we had talked about earlier about Esther, and her uncle's taken care of. I mean, this is a girl who comes
As a Jewish orphan.
yeah, as an orphan. And so, you know, you had talked about the will of God and just how it, you know, people arise in these, you know, different situations, and you don't really know exactly, you know, what they'll look like or what it'll, you know, how the outcome will be, except, you know, and we're going to talk about it, I know for sure in just a second, that God is the one who will always be the leader of how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm so excited for Esther, man.
And one of those, I'm sorry, but one of those unexpected people you talked about. I mean, you can't read the book of Esther. And, you know, if our folks hadn't read it recently, I would encourage them to do that because it's a short read, 10 chapters. But man, it's powerful, guys, to see the will of God, but how God works. And I loved your phrase at the beginning, unexpected. Who would have ever thought, who would have ever dreamed that Mordecai and Esther would have been in a moment like that?
Yeah. Well, and you look at her rise, like you said, from orphan to queen. And, I mean, she essentially wins the beauty contest to become the queen. But really, as you were talking, it just hit me the similarities between Esther and Daniel of being exiles, but also just circumstances happening, God's will happening to where they're put in positions of authority to save God's people.
Right.
So, yeah, Matt, like you said, I think there's a lot that we can pull from this. And so with that, what's our ground this week from the story of Esther? How do we connect to this story?
I think verse 14 is it, and I think it's Mordecai. It says, "For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" I think that the grounded truth is the statement right here. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place.
God's will is going to be done.
God's will.
Mordecai is confident in Yahweh. I mean, he knows it's going to be done. Now, I mean, how did that come about in his mind? Well, he knows the story of God, and he knows, you know, what they've been delivered from time and time again. He knows probably why they're there, you know, and he understands the reasoning behind all of the things that God had told the people, but he knows that God's going to deliver them. He knows it. And I think that you can see it develop in just the confidence. If you step back just to verse 13, he says, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews." I mean, okay, let's realize where you're at and who you are. When it gets down to it, you're a Jew too. You're not going to survive either, but you have an opportunity to do something. But the reasoning behind it is, and I think that this is so applicable for us, is we all are faced with situations and things that come along the way, but are we grounded in the truth that God's will is going to be done? And God's will is awesome and perfect. So I think that it's that Romans 12:2, you know, it's that perfect and acceptable and awesome will of God. You know,
Mordecai had accepted that.
And he just accepted it.
You know, he acted upon it.
That's right.
Because he had that faith there to God, because he understood it. He says, God's will, hey guys, it's going to be done. Now, Mordecai, do you want to be, or Esther, do you want to be a part of that?
Yeah.
Boy, this is a golden opportunity for you to do that. Here's a moment for you
Yeah.
to be used by God, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Well, and I think that's one of the encouraging and also even discouraging things of God's will, because it is going to be done.
That's right.
And that is great, because no matter what humans do, either individually or collectively, it's going to happen. Also, it's going to happen whether you're on board or not.
That's right.
And so we have the opportunity to choose to join the will of God, join God's story as that plays out, or to be on the sidelines. And what a wonderful opportunity we've been given to be part of God's story. And it may not take a form of being in a high position. It may not be a notable position, but we all can have a role in moving God's will closer to reality.
It could be an impactful role.
Yeah.
Because she made an impact, but same way with us. Like you said, it may not be to be a queen or a king, but it can be impactful for the cause of Christ and in the lives of others. I mean, it can really make a difference.
Yeah, and I'm holding back for just a second, because I think the root part, grows. I just think about Paul every time I think about like Mordecai, and this is not a new attitude. Daniel had the same thing. I mean, Moses had the same attitude. Joshua had the same attitude. Like, they knew, like, there for sure we have these fluctuations of situations in our life, but there's a confidence that Elijah had it. I mean, for sure he has that moment where he runs off. He's scared of the girl queen, right? and you think about the power that he had when he was on that mountain, and he's thinking, go on, do what you got to do. God still pour water all over the altar, pour it over again. You see this over and over, and you see the power of these people. And Mordecai, I mean, he is a persuasive guy, and that's the attitude of Paul. We persuade men, right? And I'm kind of like entering into that thought, but I just think the grounded truth is God's will is perfect, and that's why Paul says in Romans 6, don't be slaves of sin, be slaves of righteousness, because righteousness is going to take you the way it needs to go.
Yeah. So, Wayne, before we get to the roots, let me ask both of you this question. In thinking about the will of God, and specifically the timing. So obviously, Esther was there for the right place. But I think about people like Simeon in the early chapters of Luke, of like, he knew the Messiah was coming and he wanted to see him. But I think about the people that centuries earlier knew the Messiah was coming, but they didn't get to see him. Or I think about the Israelites that were in captivity in Egypt, and where they knew freedom was coming, but they weren't around when the freedom came. So how do we, I guess, make peace with that, whether that be looking at it from the biblical standpoint of those stories, or whether we think about it today of, we know Christ is coming back, but it may not happen now. So how do we continue to believe and take part in the will of God when we don't necessarily know when the will of God is going to reveal itself?
Now, when you talk about reference to the coming of Christ, what is it I read one time, and somebody said that you live every day as if Christ was coming tonight. It's that confidence in God's perfect will is going to be done. I don't know when Christ is coming. I know that he's coming. And based on that confidence in God, because I take him at his word and he's assured us that he's going to come, so therefore you live this day with that same faith that we see demonstrated here with Mordecai, with Esther. They believed in God because they had confidence in him that you discussed, Matt. And when you have that faith, and I believe that is that confidence in God is just such a fertile ground for the roots of our faith and the roots of our life, and even look into the coming. It's what Paul said, we look to, and the Apostle Peter said, we look to and we long for. So when you long for it, you live for it, and you look for it, then you can live it every day, knowing that you're in a part of doing the will of God.
We talked about obsession before, but I think that Paul said it, I think, the best. To live as Christ, to die as gain.
That's right.
You know, and every day it's this idea. I mean, he says, comfort each other with these words, right? And it's the idea of Jesus Christ is coming back. It's Maranatha. But you said that question, and it made me think about this. Sometimes we think if we don't get the end result right now, that we can't be successful in our Christianity. But Wayne said something that I think is something to latch onto. Drawing near to the promises of God, it's a fertile ground, because what it allows you to do is, I know that's coming. Like, I already got that. But now what I can do is this isn't the right term, but I think that it's the best way I can explain it as a bless your heart. But it allows you to relax. I know what's coming. I know what I got, but it allows me to relax. And now all of a sudden, when my roots start coming out, now I can really dig in and grow and become what I need to be. Because I know if I'm playing in the basketball game and I know I already got the victory, there is a tendency to slack off. But if I understand true righteousness means, no, you still got work to do, because you're not only growing in your faith, but you're a light that shines in the darkness. Yeah. You're salt. You know, now I can see a little bit more clearly, because now I'm not worried about death. Where's your sting at? You ain't got no victory.
Which goes back to what we said earlier. If you don't have that confidence in God and His promises, we've said it before, and I'm sure guys will say it again. We serve a promise-making and what, man?
Promise-keeping God.
Promise-keeping God. He's a promise keeper.
Yeah.
And so when you live with that confidence, then that's what makes it perfect.
It's a perfect segue into Esther.
Oh.
I mean, he persuades her. I mean, he says, yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And Esther's reply is like, let's go.
Let's go. Yeah. I'm in.
All right.
I'm in.
So Wayne, take us to the roots.
I'm
then.
in, man. So we got a fertile ground, right?
Yes, we fertile, man.
Okay, now we got roots that need to spread, that need to grow, and they're going to go deep. First of all, guys, the tap root.
Yeah.
Okay, there's going to be several, but the tap root that goes deep into the ground is this: connecting our faith and our trust in God.
That's right.
Without that tap root, the other roots won't have the nourishment they need to grow and produce and become strong. But I want to just point, maybe here's a root. Look at verse 15 through 17 in chapter 4. To me, this is a root. Esther then told them to reply to Mordecai. Okay, Mordecai said, I'm in. You said a while ago, Matt, okay, we got a choice. What's she going to choose to do? She says, okay, here's what we're going to do. Verse 16. You go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, and you fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. And Mordecai went away and did as she requested. When I look at her confidence in God, all of a sudden, I see this taproot. She received this message. She said, man, this is serious. You know what we need to do? We need to be praying and fasting about this. We need to be going to God. Why? Because I'm confident He's going to answer.
That's right.
I'm confident He's going to be with us, and He's going to bless us when we submit to His will. So all of a sudden, she gets this message from Mordecai. What am I going to do? Oh, I'm in. And all of a sudden, it's just like, it's like Paul. She received the message. She stepped up, and she did exactly what God would require her to do. Like Paul, you remember? Yeah. Apostle Paul, he heard the message. He received it. And what did he start doing? The will of God.
That's right.
He started going and sharing and preaching
right.
the word of God. And that's the way it is here. She hears this word from Mordecai. I'm in. Well, here's what we got to do, though. We need to be fasting and praying about this. And, guys, there's a wonderful blessing, a root that grows out of my faith in God. And that's the privilege of approaching him in prayer.
I mean, think about that. You know, like, you get to spend, she tells all the Jews to go tell all the Jews to do this. Go tell everybody to do this, and I'm going to get my people to do this too. And could you imagine all of the requests that the people were saying to God? I mean, it's like, Lord, help us. Be with Esther. Give her strength. Give her guidance. Give her, whatever they're saying. But, I mean, there's a effort that is going, for something to be accomplished, and they're taking it to the one place where they know success comes from. And that's, I mean, her buy-in to me speaks volumes, first of all, to Mordecai and the way he taught her. And second of all, she trusted what he said because she's all in. She doesn't even question it. She says, okay, you got me. It's that Paul, I'm persuaded. Nothing can beat me because I got the love of Christ. I mean, and so she says, who in the world would say, if I die, I die? What? Nobody's saying that. I mean, I don't want to die, but she's saying, I will put my life on the line because you've shown me that this is the time for me to shine. And she's paying attention to it.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So how does the story end?
Oh, well, for who? You got for whom we talking about here. I mean, if you wanted to talk about Haman, it didn't turn out very well. That villain, you know how sometimes people will set a trap for somebody and it comes back and bites them?
That's right.
Ask old Haman how that were to go. But for the people of God, exactly what we'd expect. Victory. I think I've read one time, or maybe we sang a song one time, didn't we, about victory in Jesus?
That's right.
Because when you look at the ending of the story, when they kept their faith, when they kept their trust in God, then the whole blessings, the entire blessings of God was they were delivered.
Well, why don't you go ahead and sing the first verse of that for us?
You really want this in quick? That'll be a way to bring this to a conclusion real quick. And the future one.
Lose some listeners.
I think about it. She is taking a leap of faith. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If we die in here, we die. Daniel says, give us 10 days. We'll eat all the vegetables up in here. And if we die, if we're not better and we die, we'll die. Because, again, the grounded truth is the confidence in God. And I appreciate Mordecai in the way that he taught Esther because she trusted what he said. You can see it in the text. She says, the very first comment, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days or 3 nights. And we're going to do the same. That's her. I mean, she could have said anything. But this is what her first statement is. Okay, let's make a plan of action.
And we talked about, obviously, guys, Mordecai and Esther are key people in this story. But I just don't want us to forget that the key is the King.
That's right.
God Almighty.
That's right.
Because this is really a story about God's providence, about God's power, about God's provisions for his people who will render obedience to him and follow his law, follow his will. And, you talked about Mordecai. One of the great things to me that stands out about Mordecai that I think gets overlooked, I know I have, is just how solid he was. When he was promoted, next to the king, same guy.
Same guy.
He didn't. That humility was there. That faithfulness to God was there. Listening to the will of God was still there. It didn't change that man. I tell you, man, he was a guy that the Lord could depend on, and Esther knew she could. Take him at his word.
Well, and Matt, I want to go back to what you were saying about the people going and fasting and praying, even though they knew God would win, they knew God was in control, they still went to God. That's right. And I think and I'm preaching to myself on this one, but like, even though the will of God is determined, even though we know the victory is secured, there is still the need to petition the Father.
That's right.
And I think that's an important takeaway.
Exactly.
As we get ready to draw this episode to a close, just want to stress, go back and read Esther. I mean, we can't cover it in 30 minutes.
That's yeah.
And just look at all the ways that the will of God unfolds in her story. And obviously there's a lot of other connections that can be made there. But as we said, it's time for the lesson to draw to a close. So let's make it real. All right, Wayne, 1 minute. What's our takeaway?
1 minute. Wow. That these people of God, Mordecai and Esther, since that's been our emphasis, they took action. But guys, the amazing thing to me is they allowed God to determine the outcome.
That's right.
And a lesson that we can learn for living is, if we're ever going to stand up and look at our lives and maybe even ask, is this occasion, is this event, is this time in my life, is this a time that God is trying to get me to be in a position to accomplish something, to make an impact? And to do that, it requires faith and it requires courage. Mm-hmm. And they demonstrated that.
Yeah. All right. Matt?
1 minute. 1 minute.
Yeah.
I think about Mordecai and Esther, and this is like tense. I think sometimes we, not on purpose, but you read the story and you're just kind of catching these points. It's a tense moment. I mean, people are about to be killed. And it's probably, the tension is just so high. But faith in God's will and his promises, and we're going to talk about this on and on and on. This is going to be a reoccurring deal. It creates a peace. And I think that, as they continue to trust in God's will, it creates a different person. It's a humble person that's willing to do and be guided by him wherever he needs to go. And you're focused, because I think about my life and I think about all the places I go and the things I do. And I don't know how many times, and it just gets me, that people would say, you came right here and was talking at a perfect time when I needed you to be there. I had no idea. And this is not just a made up story. It just happened to me. And it's like, well, how is that happening? I had no idea the effect that I was going to have on somebody, but that person was praying for it and they were focused on it. And then the message came and it was like, wait a minute. So I think that our lives are different and they look different, but God is still providing those same opportunities, like Wayne said, if we're focused on and wanting to do God's will, wanting to be a part of it. Use me, Lord.
Yeah.
That was maybe over a minute.
Yeah. You can do 30 seconds on the next.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Or 15.
Yeah. Well, we can just exclude him.
Yeah.
All right. So for mine, I'm going to say, know what time it is. You look at the different phases people go through. I think about the desert phase, and Jesus and Moses and Abraham and so many others had their time in the wilderness before they did something significant. I think back when we did our episode on the true vine, and it said that you're going to be pruned, and if it is a time for you to be pruned, okay, take the pruning. If you're in the desert, take the desert. Maybe you're Esther, and it is your time. Take advantage of it. And so I know it's not always easy to know what time it is, but my advice would be try to figure out where you are and what time it is and be okay, because the time is going to come for you to carry out God's will.
Amen.
Love it.
Good job.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, guys, fun as always.
Appreciate it, guys.
Not enough time, but again, go back, read the story of Esther,
right.
and get some fruit from that, and be filled with it, and focus on the will of God. And Lord willing, we'll come back and do it all again in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening.